Hi, guys. I'm with Andre, Caleb, and Joe. They're from Ottawa, Canada, and they are part of a book called Brick by Brick, Building a Strong Family That Won't Lose Their Faith in a Secular Culture. Welcome to the show, guys.
Great to be here. Yeah.
And it's great to have you. Like I said on the off the show, I've never done a show with a father and two sons on the show. So I'm really looking forward to this. First question I have is, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, maybe I'll begin. We've been working with university students for 31 years. And in that time, many of our alumni have got married and they're having children. And of course, we're a little older and we've had our children, and they've observed how we raised our children and what our children have become. And so they've asked us, because it is a CCO family up here in Canada, that we know each other, and we're constantly in communication with our students and our alumni. And so they are seeing how we're raising our children, they're seeing our children, and they're asking us, they've been asking us for many years, what are you doing right? How are you raising your children? Because we want to do that. We want our children to grow up like these fine young men. And so they've asked us, and so we thought, and we prayed, and we felt that God was asking us to think about what we did right. And by the way, we've done a lot of things right, but we've also done a lot of things not so right. So we felt we had a responsibility to kind of, look at our family, kind of understand how the principles that we lived by, and write them down, and then present them so that other people could, learn from them. And that was a motivation. Our alumni were asking, and so we responded to them.
So Joe and Caleb, were you in on this in the beginning, or did it take some coaxing?
We were definitely in. It didn't take coaxing, but it was more figuring out how do we write. Well, mom and dad were thinking about how do we write the book. Was it going to be just them write it? But we spent a lot of time discussing as a family what were the principles, what were the things that we experienced growing up that contributed to successes, and basically came down to, well, we all actually have something to say. It'd be interesting to have everyone's perspective, from the oldest firstborn to the youngest. We all had something to say, so that's how we said, let's just all write a section of it, and that's what we landed on.
And now we're all authors.
But it's pretty cool because it's a very interesting book from the standpoint that you didn't each write a chapter, you each wrote inside the chapters.
Yeah.
And you get everybody's perspective.
Maybe Joe, tell them how we did it.
Yeah. So to write the book, it was a very fun process, because every Sunday we all come together. We have brunch after mass, and then we, real quick clean up, brunch, and go sit in the living room. And it would just be a family discussion. So we kind of, the first couple meetings, it was just talking about, like, what are the principles? What do we think made our family unique? What worked? And once we boiled down those principles, then we talked about, okay, let's dig into, it takes a village to raise a family. And so everyone would be giving their input, their take, telling stories about, like, how this influenced their lives. And then from that, basically, we would take, okay, well, you're really passionate about this part, or you had a really good story which highlighted this aspect of that potential chapter. So you write that, and then our oldest sister, Milen, who has kind of the unique perspective of being, she was the only one with kids, so she grew up in our family and is now raising her own. So she kind of is the author that tied everyone together, all of our unique stories and takes. So that kind of, what you're reading really is a documentation of just our family conversations had in our living room. So yeah.
I think that was a big part of it. We actually enjoyed it because it was us getting together as a family and talking about ourselves. And we all families like to talk about themselves. Well, that's what we did. For 2-3 hours every Sunday, we just talked about ourselves, stories, experiences that we had, and our perspective, each person's perspective on that experience. So it was fun. We had a lot of laughs. There was, when I say conflict, I wouldn't say that it was a bad conflict. It was like, no, that's not the way I saw it, or I don't know if we should communicate it that way. So there was some good, healthy conflict that made it just more dynamic, and it was an enjoyable process. So, and we got lots of food and
Lots of coffee.
Lots of coffee.
You mentioned it takes a village, or really a Catholic village, to raise a child. Tell me more about that.
Well, I can kind of take a bit of this. One of the first things, and I think one of the key things that we identified for us growing up, is the people that we looked up to as children. It wasn't movie stars, it wasn't athletes, it wasn't the kind of the regular, like, who's your hero. That was actually a hard question for us to answer in elementary school. Who's your hero? Is because it was Jeremy, who was one of the students involved with Catholic Christian Outreach, the ministry that Mom and Dad founded, or it was Steve, the guy from our parish. These were the guys that we looked up to.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came, as we're growing up, what did we think was cool? What did we think was engaging? What's the ideal future we imagined for ourselves? Having Jesus at the center of your life and living a life of radical abandonment to him and to mission, that was cool. Like, we didn't see the world as a threat or something that was competing for our future, because I saw, my friends, they were missing out on something.
Good point.
That Jesus actually was essential to living a life that was amazing, and there was no contradiction between being fun and faithful.
Mm-hmm.
So it set us up for, like, our future was set out for us. That's what we desired, and that's the road that we freely wanted to take, because those were our role models.
What we always, I always spoke of and kind of used as an example, is that, and this is my experience, but I see it as everybody's experience, is that somebody that is 8 years old is looking to somebody that is 10 years old as kind of the model of their future. Oh, wow, someday I'll be 10 years old like them, and that I want to be just like them. Well, we provided people models, heroes for them in the parish, and in bringing many of our students and our staff to our house, and our children looked at. So in their teenage years, they saw somebody in first year university and said, someday I'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't grandma or mom and dad, because there was such a separation in age. It was a person 2 years ahead of them that it's like they gave them a preferred future, and a vision for the future. I had somebody just the other day ask how we navigated the teenage years, because everyone's parents are afraid of those teenage years. We weren't afraid of the teenage years, because we had many role models all around us that could testify to the best way forward. And so our children didn't rebel. They irritated us sometimes, and they disappointed us. Yeah, both of them. But we weren't afraid, because we knew they had role models that showed them how to navigate the future. So yeah, I think it takes a village. That's why it's really important that there's a youth group at a parish that is good, that is dynamic, that is filled with the Holy Spirit, that's missionary oriented, that it's engaging. And to me, that was so important for our children, because the youth group supported what we supported. They had a vision, they had a lifestyle, they had their calling, and inviting them to a similar lifestyle that we were calling them to. So what we were wanting to tell our children, the youth group was telling them.
Mm-hmm.
And to jump on that, because there's a big section on youth group, because actually
Yep.
our brother-in-law Mark was our youth coordinator. So that's how me and Caleb would have first met. Mark was he was our youth leader, someone that we really looked up to.
So was he one of your heroes?
Yeah, he but he came in later in our life, so not in elementary school. But yes, he definitely is a hero, someone that I would see as kind of has been a mentor for me in my life. But one of the things that he highlights is, because what you're saying, Dad, is that the the youth group confirmed what you guys were doing at home. Uh, and what Mark talks about, and I think is really important, is that a lot of parents send their kids to youth group and they have a good experience there, but actually home doesn't confirm what's happening in the youth group. And so he says, if you as a parent, and especially as a father, are not living a dynamic relationship with Jesus, you're not active in the faith, you're not engaged in mission, you don't care for the mission of evangelization, then all the great stuff happening in youth group is not actually going to bear much fruit in your life. Because if they are told in youth group, go to church, and then they come home and mom and dad don't go to church, then actually that's going to, you know, pick out the seed before it has any chance to grow. So it's really important as fathers, because I know a lot of men listen to this, that we as fathers need to be leading the charge.
Okay, now you can say that.
Yeah,
We as
yeah.
father now. Okay, before you couldn't have
I
said
couldn't
that.
have said that.
So how recently did you have a child, Joe?
So my daughter Abigail is a year and today's the 22nd, so almost a year and 2 months.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But
Caleb, how about you?
are you a father?
I am. My wife's pregnant.
Awesome.
Month.
Congratulations. When do you do?
We're due in December.
That's great.
Halfway. We're getting there.
Life will change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about how when those kids went to youth group, they're getting formation, right? And then they come home and then the parents lack that formation. So it's like that seed getting thrown on the ground and it withers and dies if it doesn't get water, doesn't get fertilizer, and doesn't get sunlight. So how do you work with the parents?
Yeah, I mean, this is really important. I mean, we could go a long time. There's a lot to be said in this regard, but I know that there are a lot of parents out there, in our parishes, our alumni, just that want their children to be faithful. They want their children to live a dynamic Catholic life. And so so we have to almost separate those that aren't faithful and those that actually are trying to be faithful. So I'm going to speak to that group of people first, those parents first, that it is really important that if you want your children to be living a dynamic Catholic life, you need to live even more of a dynamic Christian life. I mean, you have to model to them what it means to live fully your faith. That you cannot just dip your toe in the water or just kind of be cautious about your faith and then hope that your children will be better than you. Actually, you have to be, really bought in, really being a man of prayer, a man of conviction, a man that is living your faith unrestrained, if you will. I mean, we're fully in. That will become the testimony or the witness to your children. How you are to live your faith, and you guys could talk a little bit about what you saw in your parents, I guess, or that might be a place to take the discussion. Be really kind here, because seems honesty is the best policy sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah, I think seeing, growing up, seeing that it wasn't just Sunday mass for our parents was so key. Seeing, I have memories seeing both my parents taking time to pray in the mornings, right? That I would have seen that it's an everyday thing, not just a Sunday thing or a Christmas and Easter thing. Was so it modeled to me this is what's important in our family. This is what's important in life. For me, a big one would have been daily prayer. Seeing mom or dad sitting on the couch in the living room, and get ready for school with the Bible in their hand. And, it was so key for me.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, I'd say there are a lot of things that we saw mom and dad doing. And yeah, the morning prayer is definitely key, but also the conversations that were had
Yeah.
is there wasn't a contradiction. I think for a lot of people, they see, mom and dad's church attitude and the way they talk at church and with their church friends, but then they see them at home and it's a different person. Uh, there was no contradiction in the way mom and dad lived their lives. So we saw that they talked about Jesus as someone who's actually a person who's real and present in their life, that they knew, that they spoke to and heard back from. And so Jesus wasn't just a Sunday thing. It wasn't just their prayer time thing. Jesus was everything. He was the center of their lives. And so that modeled for us, it wasn't forced on us, it modeled it for us, that having a personal relationship with Jesus, the importance of conversion and encounter, we saw that in their lives. And then going back to the village, we saw it in the lives of the students and the CCO missionaries and the people in our parish around us, that was a possibility. And so then when it came time for us to go out and explore our faith on our own, we were walking in I was reading Fathered by God, and he talks about the bear prints and whatever, walking in the footprints of those who have gone before us. Is I kind of knew the path, and I just knew I had to choose that personally. Yeah, so I'd say it was in the way they spoke, and that it was a whole life thing.
Yeah, this is, I would think, is a key to the way the book speaks of this, but the way Ansha and I would have saw how we want to raise our children, that we wanted them to know and understand that God is relational, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that it's not just obedience to God, like you just have to go to church, you have to pray, you have to do these devotions, and you have to believe in these doctrines are all true. But more important, what gives life to those is a relationship with God who loves you. And that relationship is daily and it's moment by moment. It's how you live your life. So our faith is relational. And I know that sounds, really nice and pious, but what we've found in my conversations with many families, this is not the case. So what we wanted as we're raising our children is we wanted them to know that the faith is relational, making it relevant into our lives. But that relationship cannot be imposed upon them. It can be proposed, modeled, witnessed. We can create the conditions, but ultimately it was a decision that they had to make. But we want them to know that, Joe, you talked about the conversion. You talked about, the encounter. Well, we want them to know that ultimately, that this conversion, this decision to really live your life, orient your life to Christ, Jesus Christ, is extremely important, but I cannot make that decision for you. And so we just created the conditions for that decision to be made. And I would say, through prayer and through the sacraments, that through grace, that the Lord is bringing all our children to that place of decision. There it is. I'm going to choose this for myself. And so they all have testimonies. They all have a testimony. It's not a testimony how good the family was, but how good God is to them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys want to comment on that at all.
No, that's great.
Caleb, if your dad would have forced the faith upon you rather than modeled the faith for you, what do you think would have happened?
I think rebellion, right? It's when but there, of course, like as you're saying that, there's like, of course, stuff like going to mass on Sunday wasn't an option, right? It wasn't, oh, do you want to go to mass this morning? No, I'll sleep in. It was, there's things that forced, right? It's going to happen. But the idea of, yeah, living your faith, I would have rebelled. You know, in high school, I would have pushed back. I would have pushed back from the life that was being forced upon me. Um, but it was almost like a balance game of what's the battle to fight, what's the one that you don't have to push. Because I remember, you know, in high school years being, you know, pushed to go to a retreat, a youth group retreat. I didn't want to go. I was kind of too cool for school for that kind of thing. But it was kind of being pushed to do things like that. There's like student bills that I was pushed to go to, even though I didn't really want to, that were key in me having a conversion. So it was almost a balancing game. We talk about a lot in the book of what's the hill to die on, what's the thing to actually, because I knew that they knew. Well, now I can see that they knew that actually pushing me to go to Steubenville when I didn't want to go was actually a proposition to a personal relationship with Jesus, versus, you know, a hill to not die on might have been, you know, forcing me to maybe pray daily when I was 13, 14, or pray rosary where, you know, I want you to do that every day. You know, that's where I would have maybe pushed back. So yeah, what I see in my life is I could have rebelled, but it was things kind of dying on the right hills in a sense to force me to do the right things.
Yeah. Well, that's a good insight. Yeah. It's you know, which battle do we fight? And we're going to get it wrong at times. But I think, you know, you make a good point, is that we knew that Steubenville, because of the, you know, what we'd heard Steubenville would have done in the past, and we know that the witness of the leaders and the experience of the community there, that it was ideal for a young man. But to force you to do the things that young men don't naturally move towards, like, you got to pray every day, or, you know, do this devotion, or you shouldn't be, you know, watch. Actually, we were careful on what you watch, but, you know, don't play this video game, or like fighting all the battles. I think would have, like you said, it would have caused you to push back. But we chose based on what we knew what the end game was. We wanted you to know that God is relational. He was good. He was relevant. He was cool. And so we picked those things that would, you know, support that. Yeah, that's, you know, a really, and that's hard. That, you know, parents are going, well, which battle do I fight? And you know, that's not an easy discussion. In our book, we try to provide some principles on which battles we
I
should
feel
be
like
fighting.
what you guys did, and I feel like we keep harping on the same point of like the importance of a personal relationship with Jesus, is you pick the battles. Is this going to enable you and move you closer to a personal relationship with Jesus? Because in the book, Mom says something along the lines of, you know, we didn't really actually pray a family rosary very often. And, you know, as Catholics, that,
Don't
like,
say that.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't sound good. But what Mom thought, she said, you know, they're going to have the rest of their lives to, like, dig into Marian devotion and to experience the beauty of that. But actually, like, as a kid, that's not the thing of first importance. As St. Paul would say, the message of first importance is Jesus, right? So they fought the battles that they knew, if I get him to Steubenville, there's going to be a proclamation of the gospel, and he might be able to respond there and encounter Jesus. So I'm going to push that, but I'm not going to push, getting up in the morning to take your prayer time when you actually don't even have a relationship with Jesus yet, right? So I think those are the hills that you died on, and that's what bore the good fruit in our lives.
And I would agree with what you're saying, but I would also, in the book, we talk about that. We always spoke to them about having a personal prayer time. So it's not like we avoided these things. So don't tell, no,
You guys tried to help us pray. Like, there's a funny story in the book about in Lent, they were like, hey, for Lent, let's try and all pray every day. And so they'd bring us, what was it, like a smoothie or something, and breakfast every morning.
What
But
what
if
I
that-
would do, what I would do is I wanted, and so it's really important that the listener understand this. I want two things I wanted from my children: to see that God is relational, and that your daily personal prayer time. I want them to create that habit, because when we can all, it's easy to teach them, and we as Catholics experience communal prayer all the time. It's there, you know.
Mhm.
But what working with university students, what is the hardest thing to develop the habit is actually a personal prayer time every morning. And so early on, I was always speaking to them, modeling it, but speaking to them and creating the conditions to have a personal prayer time every day. And so very young, I taught them how to pray. I taught them the importance of, you know, worship and repentance and you know, asking God and yielding to God, you know, and this happens in your personal prayer time. So I spoke of that. I didn't say, why aren't you? You should be it. You know, those people are, why aren't you? So I didn't fight that battle to the end, but I definitely talked to them about, you know, what it meant. But so we continue with the story.
Yeah, so they would bring smoothies up every morning during Lent to try and get us to like be excited to wake up in the morning. But
Bribery.
yeah,
Forever.
but it backfired because a couple days in, they noticed that our room started to smell weird because we would just grab the smoothie, put it under our bed, and go back to sleep because like we weren't we weren't that bought into it yet. Maybe you should read the book.
Still up in the room.
One of the things that you meant, and I want to take us on a side note really quick. You talk about that personal relationship with Christ. Have you seen the series The Chosen?
Yes.
Excellent.
Awesome.
If you haven't seen the series The Chosen, get the app, look it up on YouTube, because in that series, what they did an awesome job of is making Christ so relational, so personal, and just showed the man of Christ.
Yeah.
Just how you could have that relationship and how friendly he was, because sometimes people see, you know, everything is just and everything is, you know, all the penalties, and don't see that ability that God is somebody, Jesus is somebody we can have a personal relationship and be friends with. And I thought that series did such a great job of that.
Yeah, he was likable. He was likable, relatable. He had you know, a sense of humor. This is another big part of our family, but our movement as a whole, is that we want to create the conditions where laughter, meaning, you know, that we can enjoy life. That faith is not something to be, you know, like, it doesn't suck the joy out of our lives. It actually sets us up to be free, to laugh and to be silly and to, you know, like you can see in a pool in the back, you know, I mean, you know, and we won't do this, but, you know, it would be most inappropriate if Caleb ran and jumped in the pool and came back. You know, but those are rules. And here's another important principle, that if we want our children are, all children are going to rebel because they're becoming themselves. So they actually have to, you know, they have to pull away from us and become their own person. So that we describe that process as rebellion. You know, it could be seen as rebellion. And so what we want, and we always knew our children would rebel, but what we want them to do is rebel in our house by just doing things they shouldn't do, like throw the ball around the house or jump in the pool when they shouldn't, or when there's a lightning storm, go outside and play. You know, they shouldn't be doing that. Okay, those are bad things. But they had to do that. We wanted them to be able to rebel or to be themselves, to be silly, in our house, as long as it doesn't rebel from, you know, virtue and goodness and honesty and a family and God. You know, they can rebel, be silly, do stuff, you know, do things they shouldn't be doing, that the parents are saying, don't do that. like we gave them room to do that in our house, and actually we celebrated it. You know, we laughed about it. Like there are many times that lamps were knocked down because they were too silly. But that's they needed to do that. This is where in our home is where they can actually get on our nerves, um, or do things that they shouldn't do.
I'm gonna rebel right now.
He just went in with his shirt. It must be warm today.
It's been really hot here in Ottawa.
So those that aren't watching this,
Anyway, if you have anything you would like to ask Caleb right now, draw a little
just
closer.
jumped in the pool and rebelled. And he's now cooled off. No, we always taught in our house that your house isn't a museum. A house is meant to be lived in.
Amen.
Yes.
And if you're raising boys in particular, you can't keep them on a leash. You gotta let them have some fun.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you do keep them on a leash, when they get to college, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Total rebellion, and not in good ways.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, in the book, one of the things that we talk about is, and I've seen it many times, is actually a lot of times, and it makes sense. Like I could even see the temptation for me with even my 1-year-old daughters. We want to protect our children, right?
Right.
And so often parents, especially Catholic parents, can really kind of bubble wrap their kids and try and hide them away from the world and not let them kind of push the boundary in some circumstances. And so even like homeschooling is a good thing. I was homeschooled. My wife was like homeschooled their whole school career basically. But I've seen many times kids that were very protected by their parents, when they leave home and they go away to college, is actually what happens is, because they've never learned to deal with the temptation of the world at like a grade 2 level, they just get thrown into like the thick of it and actually just can't say no. So one of the things that mom and dad did is they allowed us to experience the world, like through sending us to school, and we learned to say no to grade 2 level temptation while we were in grade 2. And then in high school, we were able to say no to even bigger things. We made mistakes. We said yes to things we shouldn't have done. We talk about that in the book. But that actually created a moral compass for us. So when we were old enough and had to make those really big life decisions, we were able to make the right choice.
Speaking of rebellion, just check this out.
Yeah, I saw that.
This is my COVID haircut.
This is not what I rose my boys to do. I didn't want to look like a samurai. But yeah, that's one thing that we talked about a lot in the book, but it's a way Angèle and I raised our children, that we are missionary disciples as a family, as baptized Catholics. That means we're disciples of Jesus, okay? Meaning we will live our lives in pursuit of Jesus and becoming like him. And the church has lots of, the sacraments and the call to prayer and the lives of the saints lead us in that direction. But the missionary aspect is also really important and sometimes forgotten. But we always let our children know that the world is not to be, we're not to be afraid of the world, because the world should watch out for us, because we're the protagonists. We are the ones proposing a more compelling life than the world to us. And so we wanted the children to know that go out and influence the world. Like be on the attack, if you will, rather than be afraid of the world influencing us. And so we're never afraid of the world. Well, we didn't. I don't like what I see in the world, and we talk a lot about that. But I'm training my boys and my daughters, my whole family, my grandchildren, to prepare them to be world changers, influencers. And so, I think, that was the way you lived your life. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that. I don't know.
In the statement, in the book, you use the term in the world, but not of the world. And we use that a lot in our family too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Joe, you were just going to say something.
I was actually going to say, Jeff, if you have any, I feel like we've been talking a lot. I don't know if you have more questions that if you want to, or if you're liking where this is going.
I really wanted to head down that missionary disciple piece because that's so important of building that inside your home. It's that building that domestic church that Pope John Paul II talks so much about.
Yeah. Well, maybe, like one story that people have talked about is, Caleb, that whole time where you were, your friends, because you were pretty active in school, you had a lot of friends, and they want you to come to the parties, but you felt like I can't go there because you knew it was happening at the party, and so you
maybe tell it.
Yeah, you tell a story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a spectrum where you can, be a Catholic and, young person and you're tempted and often succumb to temptation of the world, or you go on the other side of the spectrum where it's almost, that defensive kind of hatred towards the world and those who are in it. And so at one point in my high school life, I was kind of tending towards kind of feeling angry or hateful towards my high school friends and the way they were living, and they weren't very well. And one time I was invited to a high school party, and the answer is no, right? I'm just like, no, like as if they'd even invite me. Like I was just annoyed because I was angry at it, and rightly so. But I was telling my dad about it. He's actually like, well, maybe you should go. And I'm like, what? Like, where's that come from? It seems so, not what you should say to a teenager. But he's like, go, don't drink, don't do anything they're doing, but just be with your friends. And it was actually kind of what I needed at that time to go, and that's what I did. I went, I didn't drink anything, and do anything, but it was actually important for me to be in the world, but not of the world, because I'd actually burned a lot of bridges with high school friends, and which isn't being a missionary disciple if you're actually pushing people away and not attracting them. And so it was a very interesting story because it sounds so opposite, but it was actually what I needed for actually where I was at. I wouldn't say that's advice for, and you said the same, but not for everyone. For somebody who's really curious and might be easily wanting to fall into temptation. I don't send them to the party, but for where I was at, it was really important to build me up as a missionary who's not out of the world, but is actually in the world, but not of the world.
Yeah, I would say a really important, and again, this doesn't just happen. This is kind of progressive. Is that I always believed when Joe or my daughters would go to wherever they went, I always trusted that they would make right decisions. I wasn't afraid when they left and okay, would they choose not to do the right thing? And I know that's not the case with all families, because sometimes you are afraid when your child leaves and goes out somewhere that they're going to make a wrong decision because they showed that they would. So I understand that, but this is where it's really important, at the very beginning, when they when they're just young children, that we're preparing them for their teenage years by giving them a conscience, a clarity on what it means to be good people, to be a Christian. And anyway, so when I sent Caleb out, I was pretty confident that he would make the right decision, but I knew he had to go there because he was, he had a cool factor, if you will, and so he could be a great testimony to his friends. And yeah, so it turned out pretty good, but I think it's really important that our children aren't afraid of the world. The world should be more afraid of us.
They are. So did you guys ever get made fun of or bullied for your faith?
No. Because we were like, this is going to sound cocky, but we were cool people to be around. People enjoyed us. Our teachers liked us. Our classmates liked us. We were able to like we were normal. We weren't the. I was known as like the Catholic kid. Everyone knew. Like people thought Dad was like a bishop, or they didn't really understand. They knew that we went on mission trips. They knew that uh, that we knew about our faith. You know, we talked about in religion class, and there was something different about us, but we weren't the kind of the classic weird Christian kid who couldn't have fun, like has a stick up his butt, like and
Whoa, edit that, okay? Edit that.
anyways, but we were normal and we were likable. So no, we were never bullied for our faith. We got like me in particular being kind of a bit of a combative kind of guy. I got in a lot of debates when I was in high school trying to win people over to the truth of the church. Didn't work out so well. And I realized later that actually it's because I was coming at it from the wrong angle. I should have been bringing Jesus to people and he could deal with all that. But no, we weren't. We were actually, mom and dad made sure that we were normal. But also, like, you know, when my friends started talking about, you know, this TV show that we're watching right now, I didn't have anything to offer to that conversation. But also wasn't like, I'm not going to talk about this because this is bad. You guys shouldn't be watching this. You don't partake in that conversation. You just don't add anything to it. If it gets really, really raunchy, then you walk away, you go do something else, but not in a holier than thou kind of thing. So no, we were very normal, and I think that's actually part of the secret sauce of the family is we were raised to be normal. We were in the world, and the world liked us, all things to all people, but we were not of the world. We didn't partake in what was like what was wrong. So yeah,
And I think being like been called like church kid or whatever, I wouldn't even, that didn't like keep me up at night. So we would have been known as that we were faithful, and they'd always say, oh, you're religious, but I wouldn't really call that bullying. Nothing that hurt my feelings. It's so yeah, we would have been known for what we were, but not excluded or bullied.
I think one reason is that you were lighthearted. Like both of you guys, you know, the legacy you've left of your school is that you guys were like what you just did, like random, you know, like whenever you were in the presence of Joe and Caleb, you know, you never knew what was going to happen. And usually it was entertaining and engaging. People wanted to hang out with you, but you never compromised on virtue, you know, and you just were like a little bit lighthearted, and you broke some of those, I wouldn't say rules, but barriers, you know, that freedom was, you know, you could actually do something that was entertaining, but it didn't break any of the 10 Commandments.
yeah.
Well, maybe it did.
Like I'd say definitely, like I know for me, there are definitely times where I pushed the envelope and wasn't a good witness, especially kind of in mid-high school. So like all this to say we're not perfect, right? And everyone knows that we're not perfect, but like it has to be said that there were definitely a lot of circumstances where I wasn't a great witness. And actually for me in grade 11, a friend called me out on it, like in front of the whole class, because I was razzing him and I was giving him a hard time. And he just like had enough of it because I wasn't being charitable in the way I was acting. He's just, and he's like, you know, all you ever do is you talk about like God, but all you're doing right now is just like is razzing me. And I was wearing this saint bracelet. He goes, you don't even deserve to wear that for my whole class. And I had nothing to say. I always have something to like. I always have a comeback, but I had nothing to say there. And he right there in that moment exposed the state of my soul. I realized, yeah, I talk about God, and people know me as a Catholic kid, but a lot of what I've been doing, I've been speaking, hasn't been living up to that. So that was like at the end of the year, that summer I made a serious switch, got serious with Jesus, like really dove back into my prayer life, and made a conscious decision. I need to be living my life differently in my grade 12 year. And it was very it was a blessing for me actually. At the end of that year, that guy's name Zach came up to me and he said, "You're different this year." And I was like, "It's actually because of you. If you had said something, that would have been a blind spot." And Yeah, so it was cool. I actually met up with him a couple years later, at like 2 summers ago actually. Uh, and we were talking and sharing about my issue with CCO, and he said, you know, actually, a big part of my story is you calling me out in math class. He's like, Joe, I remember that, and he's like, yeah, like, and I saw the difference the next year. So I thank him for it once again. But yeah, so we're not perfect, but no, live and learn. Yeah.
Andre, how did you handle technology in the household? Television, video games, those type of things.
Well, one, I cannot handle technology because I'm illiterate. But maybe the question you're asking is, how do I handle them who
Exactly.
were on the
Thanks for the
technology?
reframe.
Well, yeah, you know, like one, technology is a problem, but it's also, yeah, I mean, there's some really bad stuff. I mean, addiction, but also it actually, this is technology. You know, we're able to talk.
Right. We're
So
using.
kind of recognize that it is a good thing, but it's a dangerous thing. So the way we handle it is, okay. I mean, there are rules. You know, like you can't go in your room and just stay there and um, you know, play on video games. But we knew that they had to play in video games. You know, like I know that I grew up, you know, even, you know, in the early years of our marriage and technology was coming, you know, and I was able to play, you know, on the computer, and I was fascinated by, you know, car racing on the computer, and that was something I enjoy doing. They enjoy playing video games, but to me, and so we had some boundaries. But to me, what is more important, is making life more exciting than technology. So let's work on, you know, what's more fun than that, because we can fight them on it all the time, and I still do. I say, hey, you're doing that too much. But you know, to me, let's make life more compelling. Let's invite, you know, a greater challenges and things that would inspire us more outside of that. Now I think, yeah, I think that's the best way to approach it is, hey, let's do this instead, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and and not fight them so much on. But by the way, I do all the time. Like, hey, you're doing this too much, or you're watching. I watch it. I love sports, and so I'm on my phone watching the Toronto Blue Jays play, and you know that's an addiction for me. And so we have to say, hey, put that away because we're doing something different. So yeah, it's always there, but let's provide something even more exciting and compelling and attractive. So I don't know if that answered your question, but you know that we had boundaries, but our life was more exciting than to just stay up in your room
Mm-hmm.
and play video games. There's a lot more fun adventure happening downstairs.
And outside,
Yeah, outside.
where you can actually play,
Yeah.
and where you can play basketball, you can play baseball, you can play all kinds of other games outside. You can play in the pool,
Yeah.
which you
Exactly.
have behind you. So,
Yeah.
and part of that's creating that funding, as you said, getting the kids out of the house, getting them out of the bedroom.
Yeah. But not as a battle, but as hey, let's do this, you know.
Fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us a little bit about Catholic Christian outreach.
You guys can go. I don't
The
know.
whole family's involved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mean, for the Americans, it's like Focus. Although, just to let you know, we are older, um, because we started in 1988. My wife and I started it. I was only like 7 years old at the time, but so yeah, the main focus of CCO was that we wanted to reach those Catholics who have wandered away. That was our, because up here in Canada is a little bit more, especially in 1988, a lot more secular than it be down in the States. Meaning, we have wandered away, further away from the church than maybe even down in the United States. So on university campuses, there was thousands upon thousands of Catholics, young people just walked away, and there was no chaplaincies and kind of the the movements that you have down the states that would draw young people back, like Steubenville and Focus and Net. There was nothing back then, and so they're just wandering away so easily. So we want to be a movement, and this was really at the time quite unique. We want to be a movement dedicated to evangelization. That was like very progressive, at the time. It didn't make sense to most people in the church. But we want to be an evangelical movement that really reached those Catholics who have wandered away. We didn't want to be a movement that was speaking to good Catholics about becoming better Catholics, but we wanted to speak and reach the Catholics who have wandered away. And so that's our orientation was really evangelization. And so we directed all our energies, our resources to that, is to reach the periphery. So that would be CCO, is we're very much periphery. And that's all our material is oriented to that. So it's done, it's grown over the years, to universities across the country. We have, I think, 125 full-time missionaries that all raise their money, kind of like Focus. But also we are seeing a lot of growth internationally. In the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of our growth is actually happening at a diocesan level and parish level, because bishops and priests are saying, bring what you have, because we're very resource heavy, meaning we don't just have an idea or a mission statement, but we have resources that support that. And that's very helpful for parishes. And so we've been doing a lot of work, especially down in the States. I think there's 10 or 12 dioceses that are being coached by us to help create a missionary culture in parishes. And so, that's a little bit about CCO. I mean, we could spend a lot of time talking about it, but if you guys both work for it,
all I'd add is me and Joe were both involved with CCO when we went to college in Ottawa here. It really helped us grow as missionaries. And so we both, when we graduated, started work for CCO. And so both of us, our full-time job is being a missionary with CCO, which is pretty crazy, but that's what we're doing right now.
Actually, most of you guys here listening would know Curtis Martin, who's the founder of Focus. Well, he was up here in Montreal, and my boys are still, in high school, or in university, sorry, and I didn't want my sons to force them to work for CCO. It was their choice, and I would have been happy if they picked a career, but they had to discern God's will. Mm-hmm. But maybe you could talk a little bit about the experience you had with Curtis Martin that really helped you guys kind of.
I remember we went up, that was introducing us to Curtis, and basically he was like, yeah, these are my boys. And then Curtis was saying, he's like, yeah, I don't know, he's like, I have 2 sons, they both work for Focus. And Dad said, God willing, if God calls them, I'd love to have them work for CCO one day. And then Curtis goes like, no. He said, biblically, sons do the work of their father. Jesus was a carpenter because Joseph was. He said, your boys don't need to be called into the mission. They would actually have to be called out of it. And whenever I share that story, people always go, oh, okay, and what did you think of that? Because very easily that could be like a lot of pressure. But for Caleb and I, that actually set us free. Mm-hmm. I realized I always thought I'd end up working for CCO, but it felt like I was settling. Like I was choosing the easy path, the path of least resistance. And what he said there is that actually, by virtue of who I am, by virtue of my birth, this is kind of like where I'm called to be. And so I felt now free that I was making a good decision And obviously I had to bring it to prayer and discern it, and through the scriptures, Jesus confirmed that call to work for CCO. But that was, for both of us, a really pivotal turning point in our missionary call to work for CCO full time.
Mm-hmm. So
Caleb?
thank you, Curtis.
Anything to add to that, Caleb?
No, that was same thing I experienced. Felt like I was settling, but it was really the start of discerning a call from there. Gave me a lot of freedom to do that. So
Yeah, we thought like Joe was kind of, really tending towards that, but we didn't know kind of where Caleb would go, and we were happy with, where he was heading. So, when Caleb made the decision to join staff, and it really was not us saying, I remember the discussion, but he was making a decision about his future, and it was really a decision. Maybe talk a little bit about that moment, like you had to choose between Carolinas and,
oh,
no,
I won't go into that, but
we won't go into that.
yeah, it's a long story. I won't like explain it
Yeah.
all, but yeah, it wasn't like a default decision. It took a lot of sacrifice of other plans I had in my life. I was going to do another program in college, but it was really, I felt like the Lord was calling me to be a missionary. So yeah, it is. I don't feel insecure like I'm being a missionary just because of the family. I know that Jesus called me to do this. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Joe, what would you like to share with the regular Catholic guys out there?
What would I like to share? Everything. Again, like I think I've been talking about it a lot. We've all been talking about it a lot, but the importance of a personal relationship with Jesus. It's been said cultural Catholicism is dead, and we can't be just going with the flow and kind of doing if I go to church on Sunday, the bare minimum, and kind of hoping if I do X, Y, Z, if I pray these devotions, then I'll earn God's favor and get into the kingdom. I think, we can kind of get focused on the rules because it gives a bit of order, and it's like if I do this and I'm performing, and God will then love me. But actually, what the world needs is men who have encountered Jesus and are living radically for him. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know if I've ever experienced that. If you even have to ask yourself, if I ever experienced Jesus, then odds are you haven't, because Pope Francis says it's not the same thing to have known Jesus as not to have known him. So if you want to know him, if you want to start living your faith really the way it was meant to be lived, the way the apostles would have lived it in communion and relationship with Jesus, a real relationship, all you have to do is ask. Say, Jesus, reveal yourself to me. You need to choose, make the conscious decision to start living your life for him and with him, inviting him to be at the center. And that would be kind of what I'd want to say to the regular Catholic men out there is you need to be more than regular. You need to not go with the flow and really get real about your relationship with Jesus if you don't already have that. Because that, for me, that's what changed everything. It was when I encountered Jesus and chose to follow him. And I actually wouldn't be living my faith now if it wasn't for that. I would have left it probably in high school and university. It's that relationship that's kept me going. So
Excellent.
Caleb.
Oh, you took all the good stuff. Let me think of that for a sec.
maybe go to Dad. You're pretty good off the cuff.
Yeah. You think about it because I think you have really good unique insight on it. So why don't you go jump in the pool for
Yeah, I'm good at that.
I would kind of really support what Joe was saying. That if ever there is a time for men to not be self-referential and somehow protecting their independence and living out their will kind of in the shadows of the church and feeling good about being Catholic, but not really submitting their will, their very life, to live for Jesus and live for the church, so that we can bring about the renewal of the world. It's right now. I mean, uh, cultural Catholicism is dead, but I believe this is a season of where the Lord, the grace is, and the Lord is calling men to become saints, heroic, self-sacrificing men that are willing to even throw their careers away, their hopes and dreams away, in order to serve the purpose of Jesus's purpose, for the church's purpose, the renewal of the world. If there's ever a time that our relationship with Mary can be is most important, it's right now. To not just have a devotion to her, but let her be the model, so that we have to be able to say like her, let it be done according to your word. Meaning, I'm sold out. I'm in. Like, it's time for men to become men so that we can win back this world. Meaning, we're going into battle. We need to actually sign up. Captain America, it's time now to just sign up and say, I'm in. And if that means becoming a full-time missionary, a priest, or just somebody that is, not cautious about their life, being fully bought in, it's now. And so, yeah, I just think it's time for men to rise up and take responsibility and fight the battle filled with the Holy Spirit, kind of as a model, Mary's yes. And I could keep going, which I do sometimes.
I'm in. Caleb.
Yeah.
Kind of what I was thinking about is, I think what's needed most in the church isn't just men who are living holiness, but who are living mission in a real way, not just through service, but really living the mission of proclaiming Jesus. And so if you're watching this, maybe just an urge that we need to be men who can actually point to people that we are walking with towards Jesus in the church. And so if it's inviting someone to Alpha or to share your testimony, we need to be men who are intentionally on, that we can look back to within the month that we've done a missionary activity, and with people conversationally. And I think we would all be on board for evangelization. And yes, the world needs Jesus, but we need to be men who are actually doing it, not, oh, I did something 3 years ago, but I can point to a conversation I had last week or 3 weeks ago, something proximate. So kind of an urge to be men who are really living holiness in our personal lives and also mission simultaneously.
And if you're wondering how, because I think a lot of people be like, yeah, totally evangelization, but I actually have no real idea how to do it. The analogy we've heard is it's like evangelization's we all know we want to do it, and we're like shooting the arrow of evangelization, but we don't have a target. We actually don't know what we're doing. So if you want to learn how to effectively evangelize, we're sitting beside an author of another book, Clear and Simple. You can find it at CCO's website, cco.ca. And basically that book is all about how to have conversations that lead to conversion. I think that's what I was touching on. Yeah. Can you have a conversation that leads to conversion?
Thank you for promoting my book.
Check out his book.
I'm so proud of my boys.
How do you get a copy of Brick by Brick?
You can also go to cco.ca. It's sold on our store there, cco.ca/store, and at Sophia Press. They sell them there. And also our family has, this is what the book looks like. Our family has an Instagram page. So it's Brick by Brick, Regnier _family. And we're actually doing a giveaway right now. So if you follow, comment, put it on your story, you can get a free copy of the book and an Amazon gift card. So I don't know when this comes out, but if you can get on that, but I'm sure there'll be more giveaways in the future.
Thank you, guys. God bless.
Thank you, Jeff.